Good lord.
That's it, it's tiny. And there's a company in France as well.
Yeah.
It's great, man. I've never seen it before. Are you filming this?
Yeah, I thought it was nice. It's okay if I...
Yeah, you crack on.
The hardware we have in mind might be a way to
found Coventry then?
in a direction that we like, and the OS might
Well
be
done, you.
compelling.
Look at that.
It's not going to be your
So,
shit. It doesn't make sense.
have you got a 2.5 hard disk in it?
Yeah, it's got a 2.5-inch Serial 80A laptop drive in it, and a slimline Panasonic slot loading optical drive with a Serial 80A converter on the back of it.
That is nice. And it's 20 watts, isn't it? It's,
At the most.
20 watts at the most. That's crazy.
Currently sitting there ticking over, it's probably about 4 watts at the moment.
Oh, mate, yes, guy.
Not bad.
Okay,
Nice to see.
400.
Yeah?
Yeah, so it's the latest
It's all
one.
packed in, isn't it?
Yeah, it's proper smart.
As you can see, the case has not really been optimised for space.
Yeah.
I saw that, you know, the French Relic computers as well. They have a really nice case.
Really? Oh, the red one. Yeah, that's a nice case. That. It sort of inspired mine, I must admit, with the aluminium. Apart from that, I had a big sheet of it at the garage as well, so that always helps.
So it's a little home build.
Yeah, absolutely. It took me about 4 hours, I suppose.
Nice. Right, do you have any of the, you know, the composite effects at all?
The composite's running all the time, to be honest. Yeah. All you need to do is simply open the window to see the effect.
See the
Oh, right. Oh, yes, the transport. Yes, you were telling me about that.
But
the zoom also.
And if you, I use click to front, but if you turn that off, then you should be able to see, there you go, through the window through the other one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a nice bit of eye candy, but it has far-reaching possibilities rather than just
Because you can add all
transparency in the window.
the barrel stuff.
I don't know whether you've seen the demo of the thumbnail with the screen, where it appears in a window and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah, it's a tiny.
Well, that's a typical side effect of the alpha blending on the chip. The compositing layer will allow any bitmap to be scaled up or down on the hardware of the graphics card, rather than doing it in software. So literally the operating system passes out the command to say scale that bitmap, and the chip gets on with it while the operating system.
Here, this is the Sam440, which is the board. And he's fitting
So
it.
he's putting one together?
Yeah. And the way that they've done it is the actual board is the board is standard ITX, so it's not specific for any case.
Yeah.
So you can fit it in whatever case you want. You know, so it's like industry standard of ITX.
I've dropped that. Sorry. I've gone and pressed the exposure button by mistake. Ah, that's better, yeah.
Yeah, but basically,
Yeah.
it fits any. This is the form of the motherboard can fit any case.
Ah.
Yeah.
So he's just got this particular case.
Just any case cheap.
Yeah.
In
Just
straight
bang
away.
it in.
Right, well, let me first welcome you to MagBash. Hope you're all enjoying yourselves. You know me by now. Get a bit of an old hand at this. As you can see, well, maybe it's not that clear, but today we're going to be demonstrating OS4.1 on the Sam440ep board. As you no doubt know by now, is the nearest hardware available and is undoubtedly the fastest hardware we've had yet. Basic show of hands would be nice for people who know OS4 of some description already. Most of you are pretty familiar. OS 3.9 before. Brilliant, okay. What we'll do first is we'll talk about the hardware. Seems that most of you know OS4, there's very little point in going too in-depth there. The benefits, of course, of the Sam440, apart from being the fastest hardware we've had so far, is its low power consumption. Maximum flat-out crunching D-net keys or something like that, 20 watts. Compare that to Pentium processors and all the rest of it is absolutely ridiculous. Because of its low power consumption, of course, we have passive cooling, so there's no fans or anything else. The machine I have here runs purely just as is, no fans, no external cooling, no nothing, and it runs perfectly fine. The Sam440 board, as you may know, was originally developed to be an embedded board, so it has various little tricks and gadgets on the board which we may or may not be able to make advantage of at a later stage. The core of the board, of course, is the PowerPC 440ep system on a chip, developed by AMCC under license from IBM. I'll read this to make sure I get it right. One of the main features of the board, of course, is its presence together with the CPU and the number of integrated peripherals all on the board. This allows to build a complete system with reasonable cost savings in both development and debugging time. As a consequence of that, of course, the Northbridge and Southbridge combination is not part of the board, it's actually on the chip. The board itself is very small. It measures 170 by 170 millimeters, which is MIDI ITX form factor. It has an integrated DDR266 memory controller, integrated PCI controller, integrated flash memory device controller, a USB 1.1 and 2.0 device controller, integrated Ethernet ports at 10 and 100 megabit, up to 4 serial ports, 2 I2C interfaces, an SPI interface and a general purpose 64-pin interface. My board is an earlier board. The memory is actually soldered to the board, whereas the later ones that you should be able to purchase today will have a separate memory module. The maximum allowable, of course, is 512 megabytes, which, as far as I know, is what the board comes with. We have there's a Realtek ALC 655 sound chip on the board, as well as the Silicon Image Serial ATA board for hard drive control. Also featured on the SAM is the ATI Radeon Mobility M9 chip with 64 megabytes of graphics memory, so that's twice what you get in your Micro A1. It has an embedded PCI bridge, FPGA Lattice XP controller for future use, let's say. One PCI slot of 32-bit, which is 33 megahertz. The later Flex board, which is due out in a few months, has 3 PCI slots, but it has no graphics chip built in, so one of those slots will be required for a graphics card. Also on the board is a mini PCI slot, and of course the real-time clock with a backup battery, which doesn't have a problem draining in 3 weeks. The U-boot version we will be using today will be 1.3.1, which anybody who's got Amiga 1 will know is a lot later. Various improvements were basically made for the SAM board. I'm unsure yet as to whether that U-boot version will work its way through to the Amiga 1, but you never know. So what we'll basically do then is we'll boot the system, which you just saw work. If you want to do it at all. And we'll just run through the basic OS4, which is very easily installed. OS4.1 comes on CD-ROM media. It's also bootable, very similar to the OS4.0. If you've used that, then you'll know exactly how the installation works. The installation utility is a custom written application which offers very simple options in order to allow the system to be set up and installed. What you're seeing now is the Kickstart being loaded, because obviously the new generation of Amiga machines do not have a Kickstart chip on board. Obviously all the Kickstart files need to be on disk. So we have something known as the FLB and SLB are loaded by U-boot, which in turn load the Kickstart, and the Kickstart loads 4.1. After installation process is finished, you reboot your machine, and there is a post-installation system which allows setting up of your internet connection, sound preferences and display options. Again, this is all very simple method of requesters. Select what you want and OK it. So there we are. That's Amiga OS 4.1. Currently running in a 1920 by 1080 screen mode. So it may be a little bit small for you, I'm not sure. Hope you can see it okay. The first thing you will notice once you boot your machine and it's all set up and everything else is the transparency of windows, which is apparent when you drag the window. You will see that the windows form a real transparency layer. This is evident the more windows you have, the more you'll see the transparency in effect. So with this was purely a side effect, to be honest, of other work that went on, but it's nice eye candy at least. There's various improvements been made to Workbench, etc. Over the 4.0 version. Obviously the first initial thing is the transparency of the windows. This includes the Amiga bar, which now has true transparency instead of this false transparency that it had before, and you end up with bits of windows stuck in it and all the rest of it. Workbench functionality has been improved by a menu which allows you to open any volumes that are mounted on the system. So if your workbench is rather cluttered and you have to move windows out of the way to find the device icon, it's now accessible from menus. The system you will see is very similar to previous versions, as I say, definitely with 4.0, but 3.9 and prior. In as much as the way it works, we still have a Workbench startup directory, which includes the usual victims of RA Workbench info, def icons, async Workbench, and etc. Various preference options as well are available. Some have been reworked. We have preferences options for just about most of the system, as we had prior. The ASL requester toolkit has had a lot of work recently, all of which is present within 4.1, and the preferences for that are, as usual, in the preferences directory. Things like you have the ability to be able to allow striping, so very similar to most other modern operating systems that you will see. As the items are listed, you'll get a dark grey bar, a light grey bar, etc., to be able to differentiate between various items in the list. The ability to be able to set font styles for various entries within the list has been included. The usual where you want it, why you want it, how you want it. These are all evident throughout the system. The changes are system-wide in as much as we have ASL is now reaction-based. Reaction is the gadget toolkit of OS4 and 4.1. Just trying to see if we can get the striking order. So as we can see, it does make it easier to be able to differentiate between various items in the list if you have got long lists. Other preferences options, as you will notice, we have Amiga Input has made a return. It was on the missing list for a little while. It's back again. It has had some work, but work is still ongoing on Amiga Input. So any USB pads and joysticks that you may have, hopefully, fingers crossed, will work. But if not, then it's highly likely that a future update will support all your input devices. We have the compatibility options, which allow us to be able to run old classic software. Very similar again to 4.0. It allows us, the default is to run classic applications via the JIT emulator. The compatibility options allow us then to say we don't want the JIT, but we'll run it through interpreted just in case there are problems. Most software, to be honest, works fine under JIT.